Hello, everybody. It's Sunday night, and that means it's time for another episode of Explain Yourself. I'm your host, Benjamin Morse. I'm flying solo tonight after Joey Galvez was nice enough to fill in for me last week when I couldn't make it. So, just same as always, here to talk about some great comics. We have a guest tonight, Matt McGrath, who's here to talk about
Hey.
his book, Idiot Terror, which is there a different way of pronouncing that one?
Yeah, it's I guess the way that I call it is ID Tenti error or idiot
Okay.
error.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess I just found online a one when I was trying to think of titles for this concept, and I guess it's like a coder's kind of IT tech joke. Um, when people come with like a stupid request about, what's wrong with their computer, they'll be like, "Oh yeah, you got an ID Tenti error there." So, haha, idiot error.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Yeah,
I've heard of that before. The one I heard was there was this complicated code that was an acronym for problems between share and keyboard, implying that the user is the
sharing.
problem.
Oh, see, I didn't
Office
get
chair
that
and
one.
keyboard.
Yeah, I
Not
I
the
am one of
same
those people
thing.
that would complain
So,
about idiot error. Yeah,
ah, gotcha. Yeah, I've dealt with a few IT people, and they're all pretty disgruntled with some of the stuff they have to deal with, and they have some pretty good stories as to why that happens. But tell us just a quick pitch about the book, what it's about, genre, and kind of bring us up to speed in that.
sure. So yeah, I guess it's kind of crossovers into a bunch of different genres. I call it a sci-fi horror comedy. So yeah, the quick pitch is it's about a lonely, disgruntled man who toils away in his basement for he's been doing this for years and years to create this perfect AI robot. And the reason why he's trying to create this robot is, not to bring life about and the betterment of mankind or anything like that. He's doing it because he wants to destroy this robot immediately.
Mhm.
And so we kind of discover as the story goes along what his motivations are. Why is he going to all these lengths to carry out this very weird, petty revenge fantasy? And then, of course, when the AI gains consciousness for the first time, it's not so into the idea of being, tortured and killed. So it tries to escape, and the comic is kind of this cat and mouse between the two of them. So yeah, that's the first issue, and then the first issue is very self-contained, stays within the basement setting, and then the second issue kind of expands from there, and same with the third issue, kind of gets bigger and bigger as we go along.
And we're on the third issue now, which is the conclusion of the series, right?
Yep, yeah, that's it.
All right. So this campaign, everybody can get all the issues and kind of get up to speed on the whole story. So I'm going to bring
Yeah,
up the
totally.
campaign
Yeah,
page here
so
so everyone can see. Oh, it took a second. There it is.
there it is.
So really cool artwork. Obviously, I love the way that this monster version of the creator looks. It reminds me of the Coney Island beer mascot. Just a really
Okay,
hideous,
cool.
toothy demon, and
Yeah, yeah.
very
So I
cool.
guess
So,
good time
uh,
to talk about it. But yeah, the artist is Ottavio Colino. So yeah, he's been with me on this series since the very beginning. So I think about 7 years when it's all told and done. And yeah, his work, as you can see, is amazing. Yeah, when I first discovered his stuff, like he had this great kind of style for, I don't know, physical comedy, and he had really great character expressions, which yeah, it was very vital for the story, and yeah, that's what really gravitated me to his work. If you keep scrolling down, like on the second page, our character Bradley, who's the weirdo inventor, he has like some really great facial expressions, like just this blank face that he has right here, where he's just completely out of his depth. And yeah, that just 1,000 yard stare that Ottavio illustrates here. I don't know. I thought when I first saw this, I thought it was really funny. It gave me a good chuckle.
no, it is, and it's really difficult to. And I mean, I'm an artist, and it's tough to do expressions that well. You really need it with a lot of
Mhm.
stories, especially that lean on comedy or kind of situational, dynamics of some kind. That's tough to get right. And I think the tough thing with artists is that we don't always really get points, aside from writers who appreciate it. But for readers, they kind of care about how it's rendered, how it looks, how the layout is, how dynamic it is. You don't always get points, although lately I've seen reviewers call out how many expressions they're seeing on a page, which I really love to see. Because there's parts of it as an artist you kind of think about. It takes so long to do a page. You only have so much time, and you really have to concentrate and think of where am I going to put the effort in. A lot of times,
Yeah.
expressions are some things that get shortchanged. Although I know it's really important to writers who kind of act this out when they're writing it. And the more important that is to the story, the more important I think it is that that's reflected in the art. And it's nice to see that
Yeah,
here.
totally. Yeah, yeah. I think for especially for a book like this, when it's a comedy, those reactions, and it's not so much a comedy where there's a lot of jokes. I mean, I try to do it more in the second and third issue, but the first issue way more was more character based and
Mhm.
very situational. Just the idea itself is very absurd. So his facial expressions really carried, I guess, the comedy of the book. Yeah, and like you're talking about, I remember like a few instances where there were some expressions that were kind of like hard to kind of convey just through writing, and I have like an acting background, so there are a few situations where I just like make the face myself and take the picture and send it to Octavio for reference. Um, so yeah, he can kind of use my face as the model, and you can see like me and Bradley look a little bit similar. Um,
I was,
I don't know how that happened. Yeah,
yeah,
I'm not like Bradley.
that's kind of the trump card an artist has. If you can't get the expression, like, okay, dude, well, why don't you send it over? And they're like, oh, I don't want to take a picture of myself doing that. The kind of a good back and forth there. I've run into that a few times on storyboard projects where they're like, yeah, I wanted kind of something like this, and it's obviously can be really hard to describe, even if you are very good at doing that. And a lot of people
Yeah,
aren't.
yeah,
But that's always
it's
kind
fun.
of that's a good way to get it across. And I think that also is nice as an artist. I've always encouraged writers I've worked with, or in general, to like sketch things out. Although people are really hesitant to do that, I think partly it's because they don't draw well or think they don't draw well, and they don't want to get
Yeah,
like show that to an artist and like they think we're going to laugh at it or something. And I think there's also an instance of it's actually hard. It's one thing to just conceptualize something and imagine it will be funny or imagine it'll work on a page, but when you actually have to sit down and do that, even crudely, you start to think about it a little bit different. And I think that providing reference, looking up stuff, anything a writer can do to kind of step into the artist's world a little bit and really that doesn't just make the artist's job easier, but I think it comes down to figuring out what things work in a comic book page, translate to a panel by panel comic. And I think the more people can work together on that, the better the end result ends up being. Um, but
yeah,
before we get too much into
totally.
the weeds on art stuff, which I love to do, of course,
Sure.
you mentioned some of your influences here on the page, some Black Mirror, some things like that.
Mhm.
I kind of I got like the plot points of Tron a little bit, where you've got this conflict between the product or the sort of programming and the
Right.
creator. Um, what were some of your influences on the story? And then, as far as I know, this is maybe a question more for your artist, but maybe you can chime in here. Was there anything visually that you kind of gave to your artist and said, "Hey, I really want it to look like this," or "I want you to take a look at this kind of vibe and see if we can bring that in"?
Yeah, okay. So I guess like for my influences on the story, very much I think The Fly by the Cronenberg version of The Fly was a big influence, especially on the first issue.
Okay.
Because The Fly, I mean, it's like obviously like a great horror film, but it's very small film in a way. There's, mean, really only three main characters in that. I mean,
Hmm.
pretty much just three characters in that movie. Maybe some like on like a few, couple of like one-liners here and there. But yeah, those three characters, and most of the movie just takes place in that one location in Brendel's laboratory. So yeah, that was a big inspiration just for how I was going to approach the first issue. Again, in my one, there's only three characters. There's Bradley, there's the AI, and then there's this little doll that Bradley kind of uses as like his first experiments on creating AI creatures, and his name is Burpo. Um, so yeah, just that very claustrophobic small, kind of intimate feel to it was of the Fly, kind of really translated into the first issue. I once upon a time when I first had this idea, I wanted to make it into a play, like a short one act play or something that I do at a small
Hmm.
festival. So that's a big inspiration for why it just takes place in one location, why I kind of kept that around. Yeah, that's the biggest one. Black Mirror, kind of obviously. The Simpsons, oddly enough, is a big inspiration, especially for the character Bradley, who, very Homer Simpson like, just, I don't know, a complete idiot. His reactions to everything is always over the top. He never has really any kind of subtle emotions or reactions to any given situation. It's always like the most anger or the most joy or the most sadness or whatever. And again, like the physical comedy, like Bradley, this guy ends up he gets beat up and hurt all throughout the courses of these 3 issues. Yeah, I mean, like, even there, if when you scroll down, you can kinda see, he's, like, jumping up in the air and, like, pointing at
Hmm.
people, accusing them in this one as well. So yeah, that's what comes to me mind right now, just, like, yeah, a weird mix, Cronenberg and The Simpsons, The Fly. In terms of T Atavio, I'm not sure, I know, like, when I saw his stuff for the first time, I really loved it because he had, like, these very realistic looking drawings as well. There's one page he did in particular, it was, like, this night or something, and like I said, like, a bunch of it was very realistic, and then at the last panel, there was, like, the character kinda looked in shock, but the way he
Hmm.
kinda did that one panel is the character all of a sudden became very cartoony, and, like, they had, like, the huge bug eyes coming out of their head. Um, um, and yeah, that's just I really kinda love that style, that mixture of the realistic and the cartoony, and you can see it here, like, in that one panel where Bradley's gritting his teeth. So, I don't know if it's an influence
Yeah, no, you
for
can really.
him, but,
It's
like, yeah, I thought his stuff was, like, very Looney Tunes and the kind of over the top ways, and I guess it's kinda like anime manga as well, where people kinda turn into, like, little cartoon versions of themselves when they get angry or,
mhm.
have an extreme emotion, but, yeah, excuse me.
Yeah, no, I definitely see that, and that's hard to figure out. I think as an artist, or at least find a way for your style to accommodate those things. Because when I first kind of scrolled through here, I was looking at this. You've got these panels that are fairly realistic, aside from the speed lines, in terms of not like it's a realistic drawing, but it's nothing
Mhm.
crazy's happening. And the
Yeah.
trick is not just to do things like this and figure out how to do them, but do them in a way that doesn't look like, oh wow, this is some crazy other thing. Manga does that pretty well. I think that's one of the advantages of being in black and white is you kind of it just flattens things out a little bit, so you can be pretty divergent and still sits in the page pretty well. But I love how he and your colorist are really working together to, like make something that feels like it's in the same scene. It's not confusing, but you get this like super, exaggerated, larger range of emotions to play with, timing and sort of things like that are physical comedy, but tell the story, and I think more importantly, like tell it quickly, which I think is really important in comics too. So it's really cool stuff. So you mentioned this is the end of the story, the three issue story. Do you have any plans to kind of take these characters further without asking for any spoilers or anything? Is this a world that could expand and be another story, or could characters from this kind of go on to another kind of world?
Um, no. No, I think, yeah, this is probably the final run, for all these characters. Yeah, there's a bunch of reasons why I'm ending it with this one. Like, I had ideas. I wanted to kinda go do more stories. Like, issue 1 is its own story, and then issues 2 and 3 were gonna be, like, its own story, and then I had, like, ideas for 3 more kind of arcs that I could tell.
Mhm.
Um, but, I have, a full-time job, I have 2 kids, I got a mortgage to pay. My time and resources for making comics are extremely limited, and these 108 pages have taken me in Atavio 7 years to do. So I have a ton of more stories I want to tell. So I was like, all right, time to put this one to bed, move on, see what the next thing is. And then the other kind of story reason is the ending that I had for issue 3. It was just so perfect. All the characters ended up exactly where they should be. Um, and if I continued it any longer, I kind of would have been a little bit mad at myself for kind of taking these characters out of this, perfect conclusion that they had and kind of going on. And what I had for like the final ending wasn't as good as the ending for this. So yeah, I just felt like it was time to hang this, bring this story to a conclusion, and yeah, see what happens next.
That's a good way to. I think people have a temptation to keep just going with something, but if you have a great ending, you just I think the next story, if you were going to come out and tell that one, would have to be so good that it would be worth kind of
Yeah.
when you go on with something, you do change the ending a little bit, obviously, and that's sometimes it's hard to like let go of stuff, but it's cool, especially if you have other stories. Do you have anything you want to tease about stories coming down the pike?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, nothing. Well, I do have a graphic novel I've been working on for, yeah, 3 years, like on and off. The
Hmm.
artist is a Canadian artist in Winnipeg, Marissa Mayhew. So yeah, we've been working on it for a while. It's another kind of weird idea like this. It's based off the films of Georges Méliès, so even if you don't know who that is, you probably kind of know who it is. He's the man who filmed A Trip to the Moon. So it has the famous
Okay.
shot of the man in the moon getting the rocket ship in his eye. So yeah, I mean, over, I don't know, 20, 30 years, he made hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of films. So this story is kind of set in that world of this kind of fictional steampunk, early space age area, and it's
Hmm.
about exploring the universe, kind of after they first explored the moon and what happens after that. So yeah, that'll be coming hopefully next year on the Kickstarter. So yeah, should be able to talk
Very
about that
cool.
more in a
I
few
love
more
that
months.
aesthetic. That there was something about those early short films that were like the silent ones that are they kind of scary. I mean, as a kid, they always kind of scared me. There was something a little um, disturbing about them. I think it was the way the characters moved and the frame rate and just the
Yeah,
bizarre special effects they had at the time really made an impression.
yeah,
And I love anything made before 1930 is just so cool to see. I mean, you really only see the good ones, of course, but
yeah,
people have bothered to keep around. But I love that aesthetic. And if you look at like Little Nemo comics from the time, the Windsor McKay stuff, where it's just um,
yep, yeah.
really
That's
that
good.
whole
That's a
look.
big influence on the story too. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
that look is such a cool thing, especially when you combine it with the science fiction, the steampunk, all that stuff. And I think it's cool to also look at just the way people understood science fiction concepts back then. It was a lot simpler. They didn't know as much about what would happen out there, and you could just kind of have fun with it more than like, I
Yeah,
don't know, you need a suit to be out in space, and it's this cold, and you can't hear things,
I don't worry
and
about
it's
that. You
nice
can
to,
breathe in space. It's fine.
yeah.
There's
I've
gravity
been,
in space. Like if you go up, you fall down. Yeah,
yeah, no, I like, I'm doing a story that kind of gets out into space, but it's in a very golden age aesthetic for the next Scarlet Twilight, and I'm kind of thinking to myself, do I really want to deal with all the physics of space, or is it just kind of be like what a 1930s person would think is out there? And I'm leaning towards the latter. It's just a lot more fun,
yeah,
and I think is a little bit more fun for a reader too. So I've asked you a little
totally.
bit about your influences for this comic, and then we talked a little bit about for your next one. Who are some of your influences as far as comic writers or artists that really brought you into comics, made you want to tell stories like this one?
Hmm. Geez, yeah. I think the people who are coming to mind right now are like Matt Fraction, Grant Morrison, Jeff Lemire, um, Chip Zdarsky. I mean, yeah, I'm from Toronto, so a lot of there are a lot of big name creators in Toronto who, yeah, I totally looked up to, like Chip Zdarsky and Jeff Lemire. Um, yeah, so I mean, obviously like Alan Moore and the greats like that. Um, in terms of like my writing style, I don't know. I don't really know who's a big influence. I haven't really thought about it that much. But in terms of like getting me into comics, definitely like Grant Morrison, Alan Moore, Frank Miller, those cats. Um, yeah,
Something about when those guys were really firing on all cylinders. I mean, I think it goes back to the mid '80s, and then I think Morrison really kind of ruled the '90s as far as like just not only producing really interesting stuff, but getting better and better and better.
yeah,
I think I've talked to so many people that that is just, especially like Grant Morrison's, like, you know, when he ran on JLA, and people were like, just that was the coolest arc ever.
yeah,
And it really was, although he kind of has the advantage. I think the best Justice League arcs are done by people that are big enough that they get to use the actual Justice League, and it's not like Captain Marvel Jr. and a bunch of other guys that
yeah,
continuity is kind of allowed for. But I think that the people that are working now really go back to that stuff and look at it, and I think that's what's made comics like. I think that's an era that people are picking up now in a really cool way, and the stories kind of reflect that. It's kind of fun.
yeah,
And
totally.
then of
Yeah, I
course,
mean,
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
what were you gonna say?
No, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, part of the reason why I got to fund like the pages that you're looking at now for issue three is my friend's father gave me his comic collection of like DC
Mm,
comics from the late 80s to the early 90s. So yeah, I sold about half of his stuff, and with the money, like I was able to create these pages, pay the artists, and yeah, and so I'm keeping half of them. So I'm like keeping all the Superman stuff, the Batman stuff from that time, um, the Justice League. Yeah, so I'm very slowly making my way through it, and yeah, really enjoying it.
oh yeah, so these are new comics you hadn't read before that you're kind of making your way through.
Yeah, no, I haven't. Yeah, I definitely missed out like on the John Byrne Superman and like Dan Jurgens Superman and um who was on Batman at that time?
That was kind of Brave Vogel, who's I'm a big fan of
Yes.
his. Some
Yeah.
Jim Aparo, and then you get in the '90s, it's Graham Nolan, and she was drawing the other comic then. It was Grant Nolan, some Michael Netzer for a few issues,
Yeah.
and Barry Kitson was on for a while. But it was good. I was actually just rereading the Batman '90s stuff, and
Okay, yeah.
there's so much. It's like a little less good looking than I remember. In some ways, the colors weren't kind
Mhm.
of as cool as I thought. But I look back and there's just such a fun energy to those comics at that time
Yeah.
that you're in for a
Totally.
treat if
Yeah,
you're
I'm
just going
just
through it for the first time.
yeah, it's fun. Yeah, I'm making my way through the Superman stuff now. I read like all the Action Comics Weekly stuff. Like not all of it. Like I skipped some stuff. Didn't really care about the Phantom Lady and all that, but yeah, so very slowly making my way through it.
Oh, cool, cool. That's a great era. I'm
Oh,
jealous.
totally.
Would love to read those again for the first time. Uh, yeah, so like kind of when I kind of got back into comics at like '89 when I saw the trailer for Batman, and just was like, cool, I'm back into this from when I was a kid. It was I think probably one of the best eras to be there. So
Cool.
we're
Well,
going to
that's
take a quick
interesting.
break.
Yeah.
I'm going to play a message from another group we work with,
Okay.
and when we come back, we'll talk a little bit about kind of what went into creating this, marketing it, and how you're getting the book out there.
Click that mouse and warp into All Ages of Geek's website, your ultimate portal to everything geek culture. Here you'll find articles that speak your language, from the latest anime buzz to the coolest tech trends. Our mission? To celebrate geekdom in all its glory. Whether you're a gamer, a comic enthusiast, a 90s kid, or an anime aficionado, we've got something for you. Dive deep into them with All Ages of Geek.
Cool. So we talked a little bit about the story of the book, hopefully without getting into too many spoilers. Showed off a little bit of the artwork and talked about kind of your larger influences. But as far as creating the book, kind of bring this to fruition, what were you kind of? When was your first campaign for this? for the first issue?
Uh, yes. When was it? I think 2021 was,
Okay.
if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, that was the first. So right in the smack dab middle of the pandemic. Yeah. So for that one, uh, um, it was my first Kickstarter. It was my first time ever kind of doing a comic project solo. Like I had done anthologies and like entries in anthologies before, but that was all just like I wrote the script, I sent it off the editor, and then they took care of the making the comic bit part of it.
Mhm.
So yeah, for my first Kickstarter, I wanted to kind of play it safe, so I did a digital only release for issue one. I had a very small
Mhm.
goal, met it like pretty quickly, so that was nice. Then yeah, for issue two, I was like, I really want to print this, so I kind of went back and did a print version for issue one and funded issue two within the same Kickstarter. And yeah, and now I did another one in between that, and now this is my fourth one trying to fund issue three.
Cool. Cool. Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential in doing digital only campaigns. I've been thinking about doing that,
Totally.
kind of as almost like a pre-campaign for some of my books too. As you look at all the ways of getting your comic book out there, it kind of has occurred to me at other times that like the best place to do it is on Kickstarter somehow, and just to get traffic there, get your book in front of more people, because it's such a burden to for users to see it on Twitter and click over, or Facebook, or God forbid, Instagram or something like that, where you have to copy and paste a link.
Yeah.
So I've always been looking at that as ways to just kind of keep everything on the platform and build up more of a following there. And I've heard about a lot more people doing that. So how did that compare in terms of did you see a lot more interest in the digital one where it was, I think, a lower goal and probably lower tiers?
Mm.
Or was it like a huge difference in how hard it was to fund a print issue? Or did you see a lot more backers and maybe lower rewards on the first one?
Yeah, definitely for the first one, I had less backers. Yeah, I'd attribute that also to being just like so new and it just being my first Kickstarter. So I was starting off at zero, like I barely had an audience at all to speak of. Like even back then, my Twitter following was much less than it is now, and it's not that high right now. Um, yeah, I was kind of surprised. Like for whatever reason, during the pandemic, Kickstarters were like doing awesome, like, so great,
Mhm.
like, people were just having no problem funding their books, so I was pretty surprised, how many people kinda just discovered me there just through the platform, and people, like, I don't know at all, just kinda pick, like, bigger rewards, like buying original art pages or, um, having, drawn in cameos. So yeah, that was a good experience. It funded, I think maybe 10 days in or so, and then we went, I think, 150% of the goal. So yeah, it was a great experience. Second one, a lot tougher, way, 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 way tougher. It was nice to like have again like building my audience a little bit more. I kind of had more people come back from issue one. People that got issue one digitally bought like the physical version.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, just for the second one, it was a lot more hustling on Twitter all the time, just doing podcasts, trying to do blogs or like written interviews for blog sites. Um, yeah, just always on Twitter, like clicking, trying to get the word out there. Um, yeah, engagement on Twitter at that point, I think in 2022 before Elon Musk took over was way better. Like I had so much better engagement on Twitter. I think
Mhm.
Twitter was my highest, like the highest refer on that second campaign. And then by like my next campaign, I
Okay.
think Twitter fell down to like number three or four. So like still high, but not nearly as high as it was for that second Kickstarter campaign I did. So yeah, yeah, just gets more difficult and difficult.
It does. Yeah. It feels sometimes like the walls are closing in, but I think there's, I mean, I've definitely seen on like Twitter and other platforms, they've gotten a lot more serious about keeping you on the platform, which is to say you've got to have something that if it's going to pick up steam, it's going to pick up steam and kind of stay there. And it used to be so much easier to be like, here's my post, go to this other site. And they've
Yeah.
really, I want to say
Yeah.
crack on that, but it's a lot harder to do that. And I think you have to be, I've seen a lot of other creators talk about noticing that and finding good ways to just gin up more of a thread that's interesting to people on, say, Twitter, that will then every now and then sort of have a link to their thing. But it's difficult to have to be so much more careful about that, especially as artists and writers. It takes so much time just to make the thing. It's very hard to market it and do when everything's changing. You have to relearn it. You have to notice what's going on, and that can be a real pain. I've noticed a lot of people having trouble with that, but I'm
I
sure they're
mean,
always going to
yeah,
keep
the
changing taking the football away.
hardest part of making comics is getting people to read your comics. I find like the making it is much easier than compared to getting people to buy into it.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely, and especially because I mean, I've also seen people say this, and I think it's true. Is there's just so much more competition now. There's so many people flooding the platform. I'm a little worried there's going to be even more people flooding it when AI art becomes a little more widespread. It's just going to be so easy for somebody to make a crappy image with AI, throw a
Yeah,
campaign up,
seems
and
like Kickstarter's kind of
I'm
like,
wondering if they'll address that.
yeah, I mean, when you create the project, Kickstarter asks you like, was AI
They
involved
do,
in the
yeah,
creation of this project? So yeah, I'm not sure if they're like kind of hesitant to like let AI run rampant, like AI projects run rampant on Kickstarter, if they're kind of trying to crack that down or hold back the floodgates. But yeah, I don't know. Um, yeah, I mean, competition is good, I guess. And I mean, with comics, like I don't know, I feel it's like more the merrier. Like you get more of a community as well. And when I buy a comic at the comic book store, I'm not just there to buy one, right? I go there to buy
yeah.
many from many different creators. So yeah, I think the competition aspect is won't drown out like other projects, but I guess it does a little bit. It makes it harder to get all the eyeballs on you.
Yeah, but I mean, the cream still rises to the top, and I think likening it to the comic shop experience. I think really smart. That's something I've seen people say about stores is like, it's not the fact that there just aren't as many books people are excited about right now is hurting because you used to. It's really not worth making the trip every Wednesday, which they need you to do. If there's only one book you like and maybe one that you're like, well, I check out, this issue of Martian Manhunter or something like that. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. You kind of need 3 or 4 books that you're like pumped to get. And I don't know that people are there right now, although it's nice to see what DC's doing is I think pretty interesting. I'm excited to see what the all in thing is, and I think
Yeah, me
people are
too.
really pumped about the ultimates that have been kind of coming around the last year, especially Spider-Man. So it's nice to see some
Yeah,
real interest in that, and I think that's what's important about bringing people to stores. And I think that's probably also kind of a cool thing about Kickstarter when there is more stuff on there. It just if there's more things you find every time, you're going to go back and say, hey, what else is there? And that's probably uh, getting sort of quote unquote foot traffic to Kickstarter is I think really important for everybody. And I think you're right. The more cool stuff that's there, and there's some really people get upset about kind of more high profile publishers going there, but I think if really cool stuff is there, then it's just
yeah,
on
I
us to
know.
make
Like,
our stuff look that
yeah, people are really two
good.
minds on that. Yeah, they kind of like with Image doing something or Boom or whatever. It's like stay out. This is our
Mhm,
space. Like you could do this on your own. You don't need Kickstarter. But yeah, I've kind of seen that attitude in the last year or so shift a lot more, where it's they're
mhm,
bringing in people that would never be on Kickstarter before. So people are creating Kickstarter accounts
mhm,
and are on Kickstarter, and then when they back the Boom campaign or whatever, they're now fed emails about other comic campaigns, and
mhm.
it's really made for the experience is made to like browse around on the platform and not
Yeah.
just like you back your one campaign and then you're done. They always try and bring you in. So yeah, that's a good aspect of it.
Yeah, no, I definitely see both sides of it, but I come down on I think it's better overall. The fact that even just that
Yeah,
somebody signed up for Kickstarter to get that GI Joe omnibus last month. That if they do, maybe last year they saw something and they're like, oh, I don't want to. I got to go sign up and make a password and remember it, do any of that stuff, and then the fact that just one hurdle is out of the way is just makes it
True.
easier for them to be like, oh yeah, I have an account there. I'll go check that out at least, see if I want to do
Yeah.
it. And that's something I think people, at least if you don't have I don't have a sales background, but I work with a lot of people that do. So I hear a lot of this stuff and it's kind of gotten under my skin. But it's there's a lot of just really important pain points you have to get over as a consumer to get something. And the fact that any of that stuff breaks down a few of those for us, I think is a great thing. So yeah, I'm all for
Totally.
people. Keanu Reeves can do all the books he wants, man. I'm all for it.
Sure. Yeah.
um, so
Bring him to me, Keanu.
another question I had that we usually ask, yeah, we usually ask people, kind of what went into your pricing out your tiers. Did you? I noticed you have like different, obviously different tiers you can get for the digital. You have a digital deluxe. Kind of what went into your thought process when you were pricing these out? Because usually a lot of people struggle with that, especially if it's first campaign or something like that.
Yeah, I wish I could say I really put a lot of thought into it, and the the print cost, and the labor that went into it, and really came up with a great number. But yeah, I kind of just came up with something like this is the amount that I would be comfortable paying for something. So $15 Canadian,
Hmm.
which US dollars like 11-ish, 11-ish dollars for a 36-page comic that is also printed oversized as well. So it's not your typical American size comic book.
Oh,
It's
cool.
A4 size, so it's like a nice big
Very
big
cool.
book. So yeah, I thought like that was a fair price for a pretty sizable book. $7 Canadian for digital, so about $5 US. Again, for a PDF, 36 pages. That's close to what a US or like a DC Marvel comic would cost. Yeah,
Hmm.
it, it gets kind of felted out.
Yeah, definitely cool. So you're like totally. I have another question I want to get to that I didn't quite realize before, but so you're just totally kind of customer focused when you come with the prices. Like, hey, when I'm the user, I'm sitting here, I'm scrolling through. What is my comfort level on pricing?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Cool, cool.
Yeah. Like it's so hard with pricing, like because like you obviously can't compete with DC, Marvel, Image prices, right? Like I can't give a 36-page comic and price it for 3.99, 4.99. Um, but yeah, I also don't want it to be like understanding that indie comics and Kickstarter comics are going to be that higher price point. Um, yeah, I can't do it too much. Like myself, I don't think I'd ever pay $20 Canadian for like,
Hmm.
a 20-page floppy comic or like a 30-page floppy comic. Um, 20 is like the kind of like the line I would draw. Anything past that, um, yeah, I wouldn't go there. So yeah, if I wouldn't do it myself, like I wouldn't really expect anyone else to do it. Plus, you have to pay
Hmm. Well,
shipping and you know,
that's a good way of looking at it.
you know,
Anecdotal, but I guess it's something I've noticed over and over again. People do have that understanding. Hey, it's an indie comic. They have to ship it themselves. Obviously, they're funding it themselves. They don't have the printing, quantities that are going to get the price down like Marvel and DC does. So the
yeah,
tolerance is there, but there's also when somebody like crosses some line, they get really mad, and I don't blame them. Like
yeah,
if shipping's done in a way that isn't transparent, or if it's higher than it should be, that really riles people. I've noticed, and so I think there's like a
oh yeah,
tolerance, but the second people kind of feel like they're not being told something, or it's a little bit dishonest in some way. And I know BackerKit, the way that they will sometimes do the shipping after the fact, really rubs people the wrong way. And I
yeah,
can get
yeah.
that.
I've
And
seen that too.
yeah, it's I mean I don't bring that up to knock BackerKit at all. I'm pretty interested in the platform, but it's a good illustration of like how people react to things. It's like I'm good with this, I'm okay with that. I've also seen people react really badly if digital is a little too high, and I almost think that like double digits on the dollars is that point. Somebody is like, as soon as it's $10 and not $9, people are like, dude, it's a file. I can't pay $10 for a file. I've always
Yeah.
kind of kept that in mind when I'm pricing things out. But
Yeah,
I
that's a good point
think your
too.
approach is something that I've never heard. I'm sure I've heard someone say it sometime, but um, you were pretty explicit in kind of laying out. I really just think about this like I'm a customer, which so many people just you wouldn't believe it do not do at all when they're trying to plan things out. It's kind of like what I would like to. Here's what I would like the reaction to be. But I think you really, if you're going to be successful at this or anything creative that you're trying to sell, you really have to turn it around and be like, hey, I'm coming in cold. What would make me do this? My partner that I work with for our graphic design advertising business, I've worked with for like 20 years, is a great salesman, and he said to me, if uh, probably um, probably mid 2000s or something, when we were kind of going through a video project we were trying to bid on and get, and he was kind of describing how he looked at what the customer is doing at every step of the process and thought about how can I make this easier when they're conceptualizing it? What can I get in there and do to make it easier when they're trying to go to their bosses and get a budget for it or even think of a budget? And that kind of a attention to looking at different pain points and figuring, hey, how do I make this easier for the other person is something I think a lot of creators and creative people in general don't think about. It's kind of cool to see that was your initial approach. Most people kind of
Yeah, I
don't think
mean,
about it at all or think about it after the
yeah.
fact.
Yeah, I look, I'm not a great businessman by any means, and I'm not doing these comics because I want to make a profit. Like, I don't expect to really make money off of this. What I'm trying to do is, A, grow an audience, and then B, just tell my stories without going into debt. So if at the end of the day, like, I'm not in the red and, I've broken even, I'm happy.
No, that's me too. I especially with my first campaign, my goal was I just want to build an audience and not lose any money. I had just bought a house. I was like, hey,
Yeah.
this cannot stand the red, and actually kind of priced it out that way so it would, however it scaled, it wouldn't go in the red. But that's another thing I think people have a little bit of trouble planning out, and there's good ways to do that.
So yeah, I mean, I got a
To get
full-time
in the
job. I
little
don't
of
need these.
your
Oh
yeah.
yeah. Sorry, what were you saying?
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. We have a little bit of a delay.
Okay.
No, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
I thought I cut you off accidentally, but I was gonna get drawn into the comic. It looks like you've had a few people take you up on that. Was that a reward that you found brought a lot of people in that was really popular?
Yeah, for the first campaign, yeah, it was like so like the first two people here are people I know, which is nice, like family and friends to do it. But the second two were not, which was really cool. So yeah, I found like yeah, I was pretty successful for this first one, especially you know, with doing a digital only comic, like your reward tier is like, $7. So you need a lot of people to give you $7 to kind of make your goal. So having those higher reward tiers really helps
Mhm,
like shorten that gap. Um, so yeah, that helped a lot. And then yeah, the second one, I think I had about like similar amount of people. I think three people did it. Um, and yeah, I think for this campaign we have one person so far. I think it's really cool.
mhm,
Otavio's like does really good job of like doing the likeness of the people. Like I asked for their photo, and then he goes off and does this thing, and like you can see her. I think I know the first two people, so I can tell you like he is dead on with how he
mhm.
portrayed them. Um, so yeah, I think it's a really cool reward.
Yeah, I'm thinking about doing that for my next book because I have a setup that would be perfect for that. I'm going to have a lot of background characters that play
Mhm.
different degrees of roles and things and can kind of play a tiny story role or maybe something a little bit more significant that aren't necessarily main characters. So it would be perfect for that. But what really gets me is I'm maybe unlike your artist. I really struggle with likenesses. I mean, I have trouble keeping people looking the same from panel to panel. So I'm a little trepidatious about jumping into that, but I'm thinking I'm going to try it the next time out. And it's cool to see that there are a lot of people that are interested in that. I've noticed a lot of
Yeah,
other
I mean, you can just
campaigns
start
doing it.
small and just offer it like two rewards or something, or like two or three slots. So you're not, overburdening yourself with having to do all these people.
Yeah, very cool. And then I've noticed you also have the option to get some original art. This cover, obviously, I really do like this cover that I think John Berg did.
Yeah, so
Um, how's
yeah,
that done in previous campaigns?
yeah. Um yeah, again, like, pretty good, especially in that first one, it really saved me, and again, I was really surprised how well that did. Like, again, I was, like, pretty unknown, and, like, within the first day, like, I think 2 people had grabbed that, so,
Hmm.
you know there's, like, $200 right there, and, this is a $1,200 goal, so it was, like, a huge jump right away. So yeah, that was great, and then the second one, didn't do as good as the first one, like, we got, like, a couple of people that bought it, but it kinda straggled a little bit. Um, so yeah, same with this one, nobody's taken us up on the original, art, thing. Maybe that has to do with, like, again, the pandemic versus now.
Hmm.
Everybody had a little more extra change in their pocket during the pandemic they could spend on, like, original art versus now when, you know, inflation and what have you, not so much. So, but yeah, I feel like the prices are pretty good for original art, for what I'm asking. So I think it's $100, $150 Canadian, plus you're getting the book. So I mean, it's less than 100 US, for an original piece of art. So the cover comes at a little bit higher, but the interior pages that Ottavio did for issue one, um, yeah. So there you go, 115 Canadian. I don't know, I think it's a good deal.
Oh, I think so too. I'm really surprised. Just from looking at, I don't have a lot of original art. I have a Norm Brayfogle Bat or a Superman page that was about $60, I think 10 or 15 years ago, and
Uh,
a Mark Begley page of New Warriors that I found at a Comic Con. It was like $20. It was ridiculously cheap. And
yeah,
I guess that and then also I look at Heritage Auction a lot because an artist, you can get access to these like 3,000 pixel scans of original art that you can learn a lot from. And I've noticed that the things that are like, there's a huge drop off between like a cover or a split over the moon in terms of price, and then sort of your panel to panel stuff, which I actually think is way more interesting. A huge drop off, even with, not Jim Lee, anything's going to cost you a lot, but even pretty big name artists, if it's a page where just like a conversation is happening, which I think is awesome, it really doesn't go that much at all. So I was surprised to see that so many people on Kickstarter are supporting a part of some important story arc that everybody knows about. It's not a page from The Dark Knight Returns or something like that. So I was actually surprised when I've seen people doing that as well, and really encouraged that backers are interested in supporting, that type of artwork. So I've always encouraged other creators I'm talking to do that. In fact, when I was over at Zoop for my Scarlet Twilight campaign last year, I'm all digital at the moment, but they said you could, we've had some success printing out original art pages at 11 by 17 with a certificate that you're never going to print it out again and sell it. And a lot of
yeah,
people did want that. So which I was shocked by. I didn't think people would want that at all. And
yeah,
it's nice to see that people are not just interested in the story. They're not just interested in collecting and slabbing a book. I think also, it's a great way to support creators whose work you're enthusiastic about. So it's cool to see people go do that. I would not have thought that was the case before, but nice to be surprised.
yeah. I mean, if I had more money, I would absolutely buy, more original art. I've done it before on a Kickstarter campaign. That was really cool. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, I would love to buy just more original art in general. I only have 2 pieces plus, like, the Kickstarter one that I did. But yeah, like you mentioned, Ottavio, he did issue 1, hand drawn for, like, most of it. That's 36 pages, and I think
Mhm.
34, 33 are all hand drawn, and then the last couple of pages is when he switched over to digital. So after that, issues 2 and 3 are all digital by him. So yeah, even more rare,
Mhm.
hand-drawn stuff to get from Ottavio. These don't exist, there are not many out there, so You know, once he's a big artist working for DC and Marvel, you're gonna wish you had these.
Absolutely, yeah. I think I hope that's part of it with collectors, that they're kind of thinking, hey, this is an investment. I think this guy's gonna go on to do something cool, and it's gonna be awesome to
Yeah, get
have
in on the ground
this
floor.
thing from the ground floor.
Totally.
And then,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't have a lot. If I have ever started buying original art, I just don't think that would ever stop. I like don't even get going on it because it would never end.
Yeah. Once I get my mortgage paid off, then I'll start the collection going. But until then, I'll just have to lawn for it.
Yeah, that's the way it is. Yeah, but yeah, again, just anybody who's listening, with beautiful art in this book. If you want to head over to the campaign page, you can check out more of it. If you're watching this on YouTube, the link is in the description. If you are if you're watching some other way, we have links in the descriptions there as well. So you can click right over to this campaign. It is going to be live for 24 more days. So you have a little bit of gears a little bit and talk about some other books that are on Kickstarter now that you can support. These are also in the descriptions if you want to click over to that. The first of these is Archetypes. This is the magazine that Geek Collective, that Joey Galvez created, and I've been a part of. We did issue 1 earlier this year, which was really cool. It's kind of a throwback to Wizard Magazine and some of those old great Hero Illustrated or comic scene, those sort of magazines from the 90s. It's a mixture of short stories, which are full comics, and articles about creating comics. So you're going to get some great advice, some great templates for creating comics of your own and for building campaigns, and also some really cool comics to look at while you're doing it. Next book we want to highlight is When We Transform, A Superhero Tale of Transition. This is a really great book with it's a really great character concept, and it's got some really cool artwork. Just picked up another backer, which is cool to see. Definitely want to check this one out. It's a really cool story. I've seen a little bit more of it than is on the page, and it's definitely one you want to check out. The next one is in pre-launch. It's Danger Squad, a 100-page spooky mystery adventure. This is a great campaign that's just in pre-launch now, but they're working on a lot of stuff I'm helping out with. It is really cool ancillary stuff. There's kind of a podcast that goes with this. The book itself is really cool. Great artwork, a cool concept. And this one is a lot of fun. So head over there and get on that pre-launch list before this one launches. Next one is Shade, number 1 and 2, The Shadow Saga. Shade, a supernatural spy, is faced with uncanny threats and betrayal. He must overcome his arrogance to become a true hero. Like the others, I've seen this whole issue. It's got great artwork. It's a great throwback to some like your 90s Valiant comics and things like that. And only 9 hours, I'm sorry, left to go on this one. So you're definitely going to check this one out. And if you do, you should get over there quick. And the last book I'm going to talk about that's live now is mine, August Purgatory Underground. This is a kind of a throwback to all the cool stuff I like about Star Wars, combined with everything I miss about how it was to be a Transformers fan in the 80s and early 90s and He-Man and all that stuff like that. So I kind of wanted to create something that is a throwback to all those things, but has a little bit of novelty in that you haven't read it before. It's a new character that seems like those characters, and it's also a little bit of a look back on, some of the concepts and ideas that were in those old franchises that we would look at a little bit differently if we were doing them today. So if you're a fan of any of those old things, Star Wars, He-Man, Transformers, G.I. Joe, definitely head over there and check this one out. We've got 4 days to go and a little bit of ground to cover. So definitely do not want to miss that one. Get back to the main screen. So I think that's it for tonight. Matt, thank you for coming on.
Oh, thank you for having me on. It's a great chat.
Cool. Yeah, no, it's great to talk to other creators doing awesome stuff. And it's also really cool to be able to share with our viewers and listeners kind of the background on what goes into creating all these books. So
Yeah,
everybody,
totally.
I will see
I
you
like
next
talking
week
about
with
it.
some more great creators. ID, yeah, this is great to talk about all this stuff. ID 10 Tierra 1 through 3, the complete series is 24 days to go. So head over to Kickstarter and check it out, and we will see everybody next week.